So welcome to part 5 of this web design series. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at making multiple pages, making a logo, using videos, and basically putting it all together so it looks fabulous. Now, video overlay sites are trending. The one you can see on the screen is a typical example, and I'll demonstrate the creation of this later. It looks really impressive, and actually it's super easy to implement with a bit of CSS. For now, let's leave behind the COVID theme, and we're going to be making another website with the video overlay. Now, here's an interesting cross-curriculum link. Some of you might know that the last book of the Bible is called Revelation, and it's written, or it was written, by the Apostle John. He was stranded on an island called Patmos, and there he had a vision, or a revelation, which is why it's called that, of the end of time. So that's what the book is about. Now, this website we're going to make, we're going to pretend we're doing it for a client, for a church, or maybe an individual, someone who is inviting people to come and study the book of Revelation online. Following on from that link, this is quite interesting. In one of the chapters in the book of Revelation, it refers to 2 prophets that are killed. So you can remember that John is writing this almost 2,000 years ago, and he's talking about these 2 prophets killed in Jerusalem, and their corpses are lying in the streets of Jerusalem. And then Revelation 11:9 says this, it says, "Those from all people and tribes and tongues and nations," in other words, the whole world, "will look at their dead bodies for 3.5 days, and will not permit their dead bodies to be laid in a tomb." Now this is really interesting from the point of view that John writing this, certainly how could he have conceived of the idea that the whole world would look at something in a place, in a location that they weren't present in? So how would someone in America or a tribe in Africa watch these prophets in Jerusalem? And of course, now we know that we have the TV, we have streaming, we have the internet, and it's possible. But how did the Apostle John conceive of that? And was he watching this and trying to make sense of what he was making sense of in the vision? Another interesting thing is Revelation 9:9. And in several places in Revelation, John talks about, he appears to be describing locusts and strange sort of beasts, and he uses terms of reference that are familiar to him. But the descriptions sound remarkably like nuclear weapons or aircraft. Again, all these things were non-existent at the time of John. So there's something to discuss and consider from a cross-curricular point of view. Multiple pages is going to be the focus of this lesson. Most websites have several pages, and we're going to be making a login page, an about page, and actually any other page that you want. And I'll be showing you some tips and tricks. We'll be using CodePen, and you can flesh out your pages in any way that you think would be appropriate. This is another page we could have, like a discussion forum, which might be appropriate to the site that I'm making for this client. This is not an actual client, we're just making this as part of this series. Finally, when you have multiple pages and assets, like images and videos, folder structure becomes all important, absolutely important. And when you finally put your website on the internet, it needs to be organized. The main page, that being the first page that you open, or the home page, is always, according to web convention, called the index.html. And you can see a little red arrow pointing to it there. Remember that, index.html. We're also going to be looking at making a logo. Now, there's plenty of logo makers on the internet. Just Google make a logo, and then you can download one, usually for free. Or you can make yourself one in any image editing software, or even PowerPoint if you're looking to do something really quickly. Ideally, particularly for this series, make sure it has a transparent background if possible. And in the context of this navbar, that would work well. So I'm now going to move in to a time of demonstration where we're going to look at the following 3 things: how to make a video overlay site, how to create and add a logo. Now remember, your logo is not being copied from the internet. It's not an image which has a URL. It's going to be saved in your folder. And finally, how do we add multiple pages, link it all together? So to begin with, let's have a look at how to make a video overlay site like this. This is just a fake sort of site. I've been to the Himalayas, but haven't had any adventures there. And you can see there's a beautiful video in the background. Or there's this. There's Revelation Uncovered, and you can see again there's a video. This is an actual video that we took when we were in Jerusalem. You'll see my husband and daughter there in a minute. There they are. And we're going to talk about how we can use a video that you've made yourself to make a stunning website, something that looks like this. And of course, everything's going to be linked up. It's going to have a login page like that, a discussion page, and your links are going to work. So let's get started with that. Now to start with, here's a useful site. You could Google this if you're doing this at home, or you might need to pause the video and put in that URL. So startbootstrap.com/snippets video header. And this is an example, though there's hundreds more on the internet, of a video site. Up at the top here, it gives you the HTML. It also gives you the CSS, gives you any JavaScript, in this case, there's none. So what I'm going to do is take the HTML, and I should be able to copy this in to my existing site, something that I have now. So if I follow on from last lesson, I had this, and we also had that. So if I was to completely change this, that might be an idea for now. I'm going to open up, first let me rename it and call it video overlay site, perhaps. Right click, open with Sublime Text. I'm going to call it Revelation, aren't I? So Revelation Explored. Let's go down here, change that as well. Study the book of Revelation online. Now I would like to delete all these cards at this point. And all this stuff, which we no longer need. That was all the JavaScript animations, and let's just go back to our site, which I think is that. Then I'm going to open it with Chrome. So there we see it. We've got this love calculator there, which we really should remove as well. So there's a script. Most likely ends there. So we've got Revelation Explored. Of course, we're going to change all these things, put a logo there, etc. Now, we go back to this. We copy that. This is just giving us some HTML. And we paste it in the body. So before this \body tag, or I could do it at the top, wherever I wanted to do it. So perhaps somewhere here. Let me put this in here. Save it, and you can see that we have my video overlay, which has been added. And of course you might want to change this video, in which case you'd simply scroll down to the section that you've just added, and you can see that this, you could look for the source. Now that's the source, src, of the video. So you could get your own video. A really good site to do that is Pixabay, which has free videos. So say you were looking for food cooking or something. So you could look at videos, it gives you little videos. And in exactly the same way that you did for images, you could simply copy and paste the link for this, or you could actually free download it, and I'll show you how to put a video that you download into your website in a minute. So we've got a video overlay. Obviously we want to play around with the settings here. So you can see that there's the height of the container, you've got the width of the container, Let's see what happens if I change that to 50. You can keep experimenting until you're happy with what you have. You can also see this is some additional information. You could replace this with text which is appropriate to your site, or you could leave it. The next thing that we haven't done, and it's easy to forget, is we've added the HTML, but we haven't actually applied the CSS. So if I take this CSS, make sure you're copying all of it from start to finish. Go back to your site, and remember this might go in the head. So I'm going to put it before the ending head tag and paste it in. Of course, you can't just paste it in, you need to put it in the style tags. If you remember, all CSS goes in the style tag. So I've just saved that, and I go back to my site, and you can see that it's beginning to look much better. Now, you are welcome to inspect this. This whole thing is here. You can play around with the positions, with the height, with the width. For instance, what would happen if I change that to 50? Change that, check out what happens. And a really good way to play around with things without actually changing the code is to change it here. Now, of course, we don't want it to say video header there. We'd like to say something else. So you would go into that, and if you're struggling to find something in your code, just go Control F and look for it. There you can see video header. So I might change that to Bible study. And you might want to put a date in there. So it's looking good. But of course, this video is not particularly relevant to this site, and depending on what you're creating, you're going to want to do something which is specific to your site. So let's have a look at that. I have a video that we took. Here it is. It's called Vid, and I've just downloaded it from my phone. And it's an actual video that we took when we were in Jerusalem, in one of the souks. There's my husband, there's my Hannah there, and lovely video. I'd like to put this up on the website. So how do we do that? First thing you do is you take the video and you make an appropriate folder. You might want to call it video, for instance, and you put the video in that folder. Now remember, this is your website. This is the Revelation website. I'm going to delete that so it doesn't cause any confusion. This is my Revelation website. This is the CSS, which is not being used at the moment, so you could ignore that. And this is the video, and any images you have could also be put into a folder called IMG images. Now, the video, you can see it's called vid, or you can see in the properties, if you right click and click properties, you can see the file path for this video. Because it's in this website, because the page that you're working on is in this website, you only need to refer to the folder that it's in, which is called video, and then the file name, and then the type of file, which in this case is an MP4. So let's have a look at what that might look like. If I go back to the source of the video, which right now is the Himalayan mountains, and I typed in video, and I looked for a backslash, vid.mp4, and I refresh the page, you can see that now the video that's stored in my folder is appearing on my website. which is fantastic. The next thing to do is obviously change these navigation bar things, add multiple pages, and also look at creating a logo. So we'll do that next. Now at this point I'd like to make a couple of stylistic changes. I'm just going to look at doing a few things that might make it look slightly better design-wise. Now for one, I think that this banner is a little bit too big and I'd like to reduce the height. Remember, every element usually has a width and a height. So if I scroll up, you might need to play around with different options and see what happens. That's the best way to learn. You could change, for instance, you could change that height, see what happens. But I happen to know that at this point we're looking at the header, so we're looking in the CSS, and we're looking in the header. If I change that to say 25 and I save it, experiment, you can see that something's happened. It's obviously made it slightly smaller, make it a little bit bigger. Another thing I might want to do is get rid of this heading over there, which is no longer really needed. So I'm going to delete that. Actually don't need this script either, but I'll leave that there for now. So let's delete that. Great, it's beginning to look much better. And of course this is text that you might want to put something else in. So and you can change that accordingly. I might have liked to style it slightly more, but you can do what suits you and come back to it as you see fit. Now, what we're going to work on now is we're going to think about how we could add a logo there. You don't have to have a logo. You could just simply, depending on what you're doing, if you're doing a course which requires you to have some sort of image editing, then please do make a logo and actually use image editing software. Otherwise, you could just go to the nav bar, and where it says logo, you could just write something like that, which, you know, Revelation Explored or something, which could be your logo, or you could actually make one, which I'll show you in a second. Now, just realize that the heading isn't actually there, so I'm just going to change that to Revelation Explored, so it doesn't look too busy. And this could be the tagline. Great. Now, of course, before you start making these pages, you might want to actually change the names of them. But first, let's work on the logo. Now, if I was to Google and find something that might be appropriate, maybe an I logo, and remember, keep considering that you would want to get copyright-free images to use. I'm just going to find something like, not entirely sure what. For simplicity, let's just get that. Now this is not a transparent background, so I'm going to edit it. Actually, I'm just going to edit it in PowerPoint. Of course, you might want to use an image editing software where you can do really fancy things, but just to show you something really quick you could do, you get the image, you could remove the background. Now this is quite interesting. You can mark all the areas to remove. So for instance, I could mark all of that. Might have been simpler for me to do the opposite thing, which is mark all the areas to keep. Anyway, let's just do that as well. And what it does is it gets rid of those things. So let's do it the opposite way around. If I Control Z to go back, and I say picture format, remove background, mark the areas to keep. Now I'm actually going to get up my pen, which would help me be a little bit more precise. I'm just going to keep these bits. Of course, this is not a proper logo. You would want to consider how you do that yourself. There we are. And you click out of it and you've got effectively a transparent image. So I can add the transparency, maybe crop it so it's suitably small. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save that as a picture or a logo in my desktop in the website that I was making in the images folder. I'm going to call it logo. And you can see that it's a PNG image. You can save it as a JPEG image, which is perhaps takes up less space. And you might want to do a digital graphics course as well, which gives you more ideas about web optimized images. So for now, let's just call it logo. And let's experiment with what it would look like if we put it in the navbar. So here, if I added a image source, remember it's in the image folder, and it's called logo.png. Let's have a look. You can see it's there. Now that's a bit unsightly, it's a bit big, so as usual you can simply play around with the width and the height. That looks a bit better. So once you have your logo that you're happy with, and like I mentioned, you can find lots of fabulous logo makers on the internet and download them, and then you can do it in exactly the same way, store it in a folder and put your logo where you want it on your site. The next thing to do is work on the pages, so we're going to look at that next. Just a quick design tip again here. I can see that that heading over here is slightly toward the top of the navigation bar. I'd like it a bit more centered. So how would you code? Here is where the heading is, and you add what's called a break tag, which is going to give you a bit of a space. I'd like to do it maybe 4 times. That might move it down a couple of spaces. Let's have a look. Yep, and that centers it. Maybe just once more. So again, anything you want to do, just Google it. W3 Schools should have an answer, or someone will have an answer on the internet. Google it, saying, so for instance, space HTML. How do you make a space, or how do you have a break? That will give you the tag. So we've got this, and now we need to go about making the navbar functional. So let's go up to the navbar. And let's change it into the different links or pages that we think would be appropriate. For one, we could have an about page, which is great, or we could have studies, study online. We could have a contact page. We could have a discussion page, perhaps. If I wanted another one, I would just kind of copy and paste that whole list item. Oops. Copy that. And let's have a look. So we've got study online, discussion, discussion. I would like that to say contact. Great. So save it. Contact. So I've got my navbar set up. Now, a point to make here is that if you were making a large website, and in fact, if you were doing this for particular GCSE coursework, you would need to consider when you actually start making your own site that you'd need what's called a base template. Now, a base template is something that you're going to have. It's a consistent approach, basically. And you would look at all the things that are going to be on every single page. So for instance, every page would have a logo on it and a navbar. Every page would have a login and a sign up button. Every page would have maybe a block of text or a heading. And you could actually set up a base template, and then it's quite easy to adapt every other page. So this is really useful. Now, as this is a small site, we're going to assume that this sort of is the base template because you just have a navbar, and we're going to adapt this bit in the center. But that's worth remembering, and when you're planning your website, make sure you keep that in mind. one of the reasons for that is particularly the navbar. If you have a base template and you have it set up, it would avoid you having to change all these links several times, and that will make sense in a minute. So how do we set up everything now? I'm going to save that, and we're going to go back to our website folder, where you can see I have a video overlay. That's the main website. Now remember I told you that when you have your website structure, the main page should always be called index. That might not let me do that. Oh, it did, because I had it open. I'm just going to close all this stuff for a minute. That's great. So that's the one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to call this index. And this is my main page. This is the page that opens up, and I would like to be able to make these pages, so when I click on them, these pages open up. One quick way to do it is copy and paste the index page, and I'm going to call this, what's the second page called? Study Online. So let's call it Study Online. You'll notice a problem in a minute, but first let's just show you how that would be done. So if I open up, if I open up Sublime Text and open up Study Online, I can change this. I might want to delete the header because I don't want a header there. I do want the navbar, and I don't need any of this either. Let's see what it looks like so far. So if I click on Study Online and open it with Chrome, you can see it says Studies Online. This is just generic at the moment. And obviously I have the navbar and the sign up and login, but it's not linked up. So if I go back now to, I'm not sure if that's the right page, so I'll just make sure it is. Yep, so the index, which is my home page, and I go into the navbar. You can see that this is the navbar, and that's the hyperlink reference, href reference, to the home page. So I could just simply write index.html, and that would take me to the home page. Study Online was just called studyonline.html. It's as easy as that, because it's in the same folder. You don't need to define which folder it's in. And of course, that, if I now saved it, would take me to the right page. Let's open that up again. So Study Online, as you can see, this link took me here, but I'm now on the Study Online page, and the navbar doesn't have the home link on it. So you can see the benefit of setting up a base template. What I now have to do is go back to the Study Online page, and I have to update all the links on the Study Online page. It's not too difficult because it's a small website, but as things get bigger, you'd want to be super organized. Let's just make sure that is the correct name of it. I think it's called Study Online, right? So now I've updated the navbar links in both pages. You can also do that with everything else. I can call that discussion. I can call that contact. And of course, do exactly the same thing here. And you're going to have to, when you create your pages, you're going to have to create them using the same links. Now, I don't have a sign up page yet, or a login page, but in exactly the same way that you're linking these things, you could link this button. You could add a reference around the button to link the button to go to a login page. For now, just for simplicity, let me make that the login page. So I'm going to do that. And And let's go about now making those pages. So I click on Study Online, which has been set up now with all the links, I hope. Just save it. Yeah. Just try that again. So Study Online, copy, and let's make this one the About page. I don't think there was an About page. I think it was a discussion. And let's make that one the Login page. What should happen now is, if I go back to Home, which I might not have linked up here. So let's make sure we're opening up the right website. Open with Google Chrome. Here it is. That one. Close that, close that, and close that. So I've opened up my site. I click on Study Online. I click on Discussion. Now you're not seeing it change. It is actually changing. I've just not changed the headings. So let me do that for you quickly so you believe me. Discussion. Open file. Login. Right, so let's change the discussion to nice heading called Discussion. Let's change the Story Online, or Study Online rather, to Study Online. And of course, let's go to the Login page. Let's call it Login. Delete that and put in H1, which says Login. And we'll add some login functionality here in a minute. If I now went back, you'll see that the whole thing works. Study, discussion, login, Study Online, Home, etc. For some reason, the Home wasn't working on one of the pages, and you can just check the links to make sure everything has been tagged correctly. Now for the login page, at this point you're becoming very confident with looking up stuff. But you could just look up a login, a lovely login that suits your, takes your fancy here on CodePen or anywhere. And again, some of these might be just pure HTML, CSS. Some of them might include JavaScript. So any of these, I think I had one particular example. Let's have a look at the one that I had. It was this. If you want to use the same one, you can just pause the screen and have a look at that. And open this. So this gives me the HTML for it. Remember, always compile the HTML before you copy it if it's not compiled already. These two have been compiled. So I'm going to copy the body. Actually, you don't need the body because we already have a body in our class, in our code. So I just copy the divs, the div sections. Let's paste it into my login page there. If I save that and go back to my login page, you'll see it doesn't look very nice. What's the reason for that? We don't have the CSS yet. So compile your CSS if it hasn't been done already. Copy all of that. Best way to do it is Control-A, copy all the code, Control-C, which copies it. And then go up to your login page, into the head, somewhere at the head. I'm going to put it just before the end of the head. Add your style tags. And paste in your CSS. On going back, you have your login, and of course you can style this, put it to the left or the right as you see fit. Now you can add a form in the discussion, or you can get a chat room. You can, Google some JavaScript chat rooms. There's a lot you can do, but you can see how very quickly now this is beginning to look like a fully fledged website. So at this point, you're asking, what do I do now? Here's a checklist. Please pause the screen or take a picture of it. And these are some of the things that you need to do now. 1. Create an appropriate logo for your website. Now, depending on how perfectionist you are, This could take a long time, so spend some time on it. Your logo really uniquely identifies your business or your website. Make a folder and have a very clear file structure in it. Make sure you have an IMG folder for images, video for videos, and you make sure that you labeled your main page index.html. Save your images and videos as required. Use a video on your website, embed or overlay it. You can create multiple pages and hyperlink them. Why don't you try making a login screen? Of course, it doesn't work yet because we don't have the back end yet. And try and see if you can add some embeds, additional features, JavaScript, plugins, maybe animations to your site as you see fit. There's some reference sites there for you to look at as well. In the next lesson, we're going to be making it real and live. You're going to be actually hosting your website, which means putting it online on a server online. I'll show you how to buy or actually even get a free domain name. And that's going to be when you put your website online for your customers to look at, or perhaps even if it's a live business, for it to actually go live. So be thinking about that, and particularly be thinking about a domain name, such as www.testandtrack.io or whatever your website is, www.bensburgers.com. So think about a domain name. We'll be talking about that next lesson.